I'm Lacey Smith. I am a CVI coordinator here at Perkins School for the Blind, and also I am a parent of a medically complex child with CVI. Just let me know if anything on the screen doesn't come up right. So this is my daughter Savannah, and she has changed the world for me in a phenomenal way, and so my duty as her parent is to advocate and change the world for her. Here's a picture of a child who is, she's actually in a stander wearing a headband with long brown hair. Okay, so we're gonna do a little scenario, and I want some participation from the audience. So I'm gonna put up here, Child A. So we're going to talk a little bit about Child A. Child A is very vocal. She loves water sports, loves food, musical, in the 6th grade, has clear preferences, social, loves to be around people, stylish, and she's very persistent. So if you're thinking about Child A, what kind of things are you thinking about, like the outcomes for this child? What does their school day look like maybe? What does their home life look like? Does anybody have any thoughts?
Being social at school, has lots of friends, and having the best life.
Anybody else?
I would say at home, they're involved in different activities, they go places, a lot of enrichment.
What do you think at the 6th grade level children are interested in doing? What they want to do. Definitely. Okay. So then I present Child B. Child B is nonverbal, non-ambulatory, has feeding difficulties, has difficulty accessing a variety of toys, learning on a non-academic path, laid back, misses out on social opportunities, and the parents choose her clothing, and the child is very inconsistent. So when you think about Child B, what things come to your mind as far as what their day might look like or what their journey might be? More routine and predictable activities. Easy to assume, yep, there's less agency for Child B. Lots of parent support needed. Okay, well, I'm actually talking about the same child. So just a little exercise to kind of show, like, you know, as a parent, one of my biggest missions is to always think about her in positive light. And, you know, if I went in and said, hey, my child's non-ambulatory, nonverbal, she has feeding difficulties, if I chose Child B to talk about her in a light when I'm speaking to others, then automatically you might have a more negative kind of way of thinking about her. But if you think about all the good things your child does or all that makes them what they are, then, you know, Child A seems more appealing in some ways, but they're really actually the same child. And all these things described, that's exactly who she is. Like, I mean, she's more than that, but so one of the things that I think about a lot is that as a parent, we don't always have a choice of the obstacles we face, but we have a decision in how we react to it. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, any kind of obstacle I face with her as a parent, I choose more of the positive light. And that doesn't mean that I don't have hard days or struggle with some things, but it does mean that the way I internalize things is the way, you know, I want her to be happy and I want her to have a good life based on the way I give her opportunities in her life. And I chose this when I was researching and trying to find, you know, put this presentation together. I came across this quote that spoke really highly to me. So the emotional journey of caregiving is circular, and seemingly, at least for me, the circles extend out wider with each passing year. This journey isn't not linear. We do not pass through one stage, enter the next, and leave behind the previous one, and leave the previous one completely behind. We circle through all stages, all emotions again and again. And I think when I think about raising a child with such significant medical needs, this really relates to how I feel about everything. It just keeps going. We can be on a good path, but then we keep going through it again and again and again. So, here's my daughter again, Savannah, and raising her since the minute she was born, she's been like a huge puzzle piece. And slowly over time, we've been putting together the pieces of her puzzle. So, the first thing I can say is that Savannah was in the NICU for 6 weeks. And during that time, she developed hydrocephalus based on a brain bleed. And then, as time continued, she continued to add these diagnoses that are all right here. Mainly because of the one in the far right corner, which is Ogden syndrome. It's an ultra-rare genetic mutation that just spontaneously occurred at birth. It affects it's an X-linked gene that affects the NAA10 the gene, and that's a very important and a very long gene in our bodies that we've probably never heard of unless your kid has Ogden syndrome. But with her Ogden syndrome, she was diagnosed with that about right before her 4th birthday. But she has all these other complications, including cerebral palsy. She has CVI. She has EOE, which is eosinophilic esophagitis, and that is inflammation in her esophagus. She has epilepsy and prolonged QT, which is a heart condition. And she also has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And I can say that too as a parent. That was more for our benefit, not to say that she didn't have some of the qualities that come along with autism and that many children with autism who have Ogden syndrome. But in the state of Massachusetts, if you have that diagnosis, you're definitely getting more therapy, and that is what she needed. So here is kind of the center of my presentation. This is Savannah's care map, and there are even a few things missing from it, and it just goes to show you how medically complex she is, how much is involved in her care, and how much support she needs across all areas. So, yeah, I want to make sure that slide popped up. So I always think of her, our heart is at the center. So Savannah's life is the center of our lives. We focus on her needs at all times and try to let her live her best life and help her reach her fullest potential. So it's important for us to keep in mind what makes her happy in her life too. So I'm just going to start kind of breaking down each of these areas and describing a little bit about our journey, I guess, along her care map. So for school, she has out-of-district placement, and we'll talk a little bit about that. When you live in the state of Massachusetts and you enter school age based on an IEP, you typically would go to your local school and get supports. But even from then, I started advocating for her to be out of district. And so she started at a school, collaborative in our area. And it was a good fit for her for the first year and a half. She had an inclusive classroom. So there were children with disabilities and there were children with that were peer models. So I loved that aspect of it. But by the second year of school, so she was 4, Savannah, with her CVI and all her sensory processing, she had a really hard time with a lot of noises in her classroom. And so by the end of her second school year, she was being observed for behavioral issues, meaning that she was self-injuring herself. And I remember they started collecting data, and the data was Savannah hit her head 122 times in 30 minutes. So, and she's this lovely little girl, and those who know her know this. And for that, for me to get that information as a parent, I said, what do we need to do? And so they started proposing new classrooms within her school, and they were with kids that weren't even close to her age. They were quite a bit older. I think she was 4 at the time, and there was a 9-year-old, and so there was this big age gap. And I just said, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in looking at what other schools are out there to offer. And we looked at all the schools, the private schools in the Boston area, but still I continued to push for her to be looked at Perkins. And so they agreed to look at Perkins for her. And in the end, that was the best fit for her. It still is the best fit for her. I can say that. I mean, there's times I've looked at other schools along the way to see if there's different needs that can support her. And I always come back to Perkins is amazing. Her team is amazing. The collaboration here is amazing. And she's really getting what she needs. So she has a lot of therapies at school. She has TBI, she has speech, she has PT, she has OT, she has music therapy. She has assistive technology. She gets to swim. So a lot of good things for her. In her IEP, she has a unique learning style considerations for her CVI accommodations and compensatory strategies that support her access to learning. There's expanded core curriculum considerations. She just had an IEP recently, and she's going to be joining a social group, which I'm really excited about. A very small a very small social group where the social worker is going to lead it, and she'll be with another couple peers. So anyway, that's part of her school journey, how she got here, how I started learning to advocate for her school needs, really before she even entered the school. I mean, before she was 3, because I remember our TVI at the time said, write a list, pros, cons. And I wrote a list of pros and cons, even relating down to they have a bathroom in their classroom. Do they not have a bathroom in their classroom? What kind of therapies is she going to get? And from there, I remember, and even her evaluations I can talk about a little bit. She got evaluated, as every child would, before they go into school. And I remember the OT in particular saying, she's very self-defensive. She really has some sensory issues. And I was like, no, she doesn't. And I remember after that, I'm like, you spent 30 minutes with her. That's all you know about her. I can tell you as her mother, she doesn't have sensory issues in that sense. She wasn't, I just think it's an important reminder that we continue to advocate and speak up about our children. All right. One of the most important parts of her school journey for me has been the collaboration. And so I've, in order for Savannah to succeed at school, we need close collaboration between me and her team members. And so her teacher, I reached out to her and I just said, what does it mean to you to collaborate with a parent? And I wasn't talking about myself personally. I just was trying to get a little content for this. And she said, the relationship between the SPED teacher and parent is so important. Understanding the needs of the family, how those relate to school, and how to help teach routines and concepts not only helps the family, but helps when I am planning for my students' goals and their futures. I love when parents have an idea or direction for IEP goals because it helps me understand the overall goals of the family and how I can help them reach those goals for their child. Parents are one of the most important members of the child's team, and I would just add in there parents probably are the most important part of the child's team. And the closer the collaborative relationship between the SPED teacher and the parent, the better the child and student will be overall. So I think about how important it is for me. She's had several teachers across the years, the ones that reach out to me, email me, tell me their concerns, or who I have close connection with. It just makes it so much easier. Just take a drink real quick. So, her SLP also sent me, I asked her the same question. I said, what does it mean for you to collaborate? And we, a complex child like Savannah, who has complex communication skills, like we have to be on top of this, and feeding difficulties all the time. So she said collaborating with parents around their child's communication skills is so important because they can give detailed and holistic information about their child's skills. They can speak to what they have worked on in the past and progress they have seen. They can share what works well for them at home and what they can practice with their daily routines, what is important to them in their everyday life. And they can give guidance on specific practice of vocabulary and communication needs. Having their input allows for increased trust, understanding, and eagerness to practice with supports growth, and it supports growth and independence for their child. And I think it's just like, as having a child that's nonverbal, like the closer the communication we have with everybody, speaking as a parent, is just the more our child is going to succeed. Because if I wasn't reaching out and trying to find out what's supporting her at school, I wouldn't know, I wouldn't be able to practice it. But if something also isn't going to work for us in our home, we need to be able to like speak up and really share this information with team members, because in order for a child to really reach their fullest potential, then they're going to need to have a lot of overlap and support and collaboration amongst all teams. And I'm going to talk more about, outside of her school team, her medical team as well. So aside from school, getting all the therapies that she gets at school, Savannah also goes to additional therapies, including weekly OT and PT at the Napa Center, which also offers intensives, and she generally goes twice yearly. So she's getting a lot of support, a lot of PT and OT, just to help her complex body and hopefully give her more independence. She's on a current break with Spalding, but for the past year she's been going to weekly speech and communication sessions. She goes to the FRC, which is a clinic that has multidisciplinarians across, including like a physiatrist, a PT, and OT, a speech, to kind of look at some of the needs that she might have. Things that have come from that are like she'd benefit from Botox, or she would benefit from this type of brace or another type of brace. But it's just something that we continue to do because it's always been very supportive for her. She goes to equipment clinic annually, and more if needed. I think that she's probably getting to the age where her equipment needs will lessen, because she's going to eventually stop growing as much as she has in the past almost 12 years. But we continue to go to the chiropractor weekly, which she's been doing since she was about 5 years old. And the thing about the chiropractor is I go too, because lifting a 4'3", 60-pound child is a lot for a parent, as any parent knows that's doing that. Swim Angelfish is a great program we found for her for aquatic therapy, and she had started to do this in December, and then quickly they changed their venue, and now she's out of it again. So this is just like one other obstacle. It's like once we find something good, something is taken away. So these are just kind of some of the challenges I face as a parent. Other past therapies that she's done that she's really benefited from is hippotherapy. She hasn't done that for a while, and again, that's kind of based on time. I mean, I'm kind of telling you how complex she is just this way. Now we get into the medical piece of Savannah. So we have a local pediatrician. He's wonderful. He's been with her since she was about 3 years old, but I'm on like a first name basis with the nurse as well. So anytime we need anything, I just email her, and they're so responsive. And that's because, you know, I've tried to create this good relationship with her care providers, and the reason I do so is for things like this. Like, can you know, refill her thicket or whatever? All I have to do is email them. I don't have to chase everybody down. And then, you know, part of the medical piece is our private insurance, and also Medicaid. So she has Mass Health, Common Health, and she's a part of the Premium Assistant Program, which for parents that might not be aware of this, the Premium Assistance Program actually like reimburses what you're paying for your health insurance. So that really helps a family out a lot. Like, insurance is really expensive, and this is based on her complex medical needs. Other state insurance that Massachusetts offers is Mass Health Standard, the Kaylee Mulligan home nursing, when two nursing needs are identified, which Savannah doesn't have Kaylee Mulligan, but she qualified for nursing a couple years ago, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue to go. But with that, we also have a community case manager. So somebody that's kind of looking at her as a whole and everything that kind of goes along with it. This is one piece of her medical. I think it's important to note, and I'm going to talk and give some examples of some of her medical care, but we live in an area that has wonderful health care, and we are very, very blessed because we do. But that doesn't mean that there haven't been obstacles along the way in choosing healthcare providers or people that really can also support my personality. Like, you know, there's got to be a family match in general, and I'll talk more about that. But at BCH, and I should include her care map really is a little bit more extended than this because she sees other eye care professionals too. But she sees neuro-ophthalmology for, you know, vision care, and then once a year, every year and a half, she gets a visually evoked potential, which they put electrodes, you know, on her head, and they're measuring the response from the eye to the brain to see if it's if it's there. Okay. She also goes to see cardiology. She has an electrophysiologist, which is a fancy term for somebody that is more advanced actually than the cardiologist, and they look at the heart rhythms. Because with her Ogden syndrome, many of the children have prolonged QT, which is a increased interval between the Q and the T. So an arrhythmia essentially. And hers is okay, but we have to still be monitored. She has yearly echocardiograms, EKGs, and additional heart monitoring at times. I get a frog in my throat. I know, it's just like really dry all of a sudden. But anyway, she also sees orthopedics, and she has yearly hip and spine x-rays, or actually probably more than that. They check her hips a little bit more frequently because there is a little hip dysplasia. A lot of children that aren't walking do naturally have this happen, and the spasticity due to her CP. And so MGH is her biggest team. This is probably in part because she was born there and we started receiving care. but also, because I feel like she has really a dream team, honestly. And sometimes that's splintering different hospitals to make it all work. But complex care was something I'd heard of back when we were in the infant toddler program, when Savannah was probably 2 years old. And I think she was about 9 years old before we actually even signed on to complex care. And I regret not doing it sooner, in the sense that they can really help push your appointments along, and they can reach out and help you get things done when you're kind of facing barriers that way. So they've been a great resource for us. She's followed by neurology for her epilepsy, and neurosurgery, even though she had brain surgery when she was a day shy of a month. She continues to have yearly MRIs due to just making sure that everything looks stable, or more frequently if there's any shunt concerns. So I even think about, like with Savannah, she had a rough year medically last year, and even then, like, I remember she got dehydrated. So dehydration should be easily treated, but not for a kid like Savannah. So what happened is I had to take her in for her to get fluids, but then, she got dehydrated because she was vomiting. So the first checklist, if you have hydrocephalus, is it your shunt? You need an MRI, you need a spinal tap, you need all of this. So it's having hydrocephalus for her hasn't really been a huge issue. I mean, it seems like it's well controlled and whatever, but these are the times it gets a little trickier and very expensive for the hospitals. And she's also followed by GI because of her EOE. And what that entails is every year, maybe they won't be so often, but since she's had the diagnosis at age 7, she's had yearly scopes, because if we can't tell what's going on, so we have to scope her and make sure it's not inflammation. But the last couple times have been very reassuring, so hopefully someday we'll get rid of that appointment. But again, when I think about collaboration, I also think about collaborating with medical teams. So MGH did a little article on Savannah back in the fall, and so I just put a couple quotes from their article. As a provider, I wanted to keep the focus on Savannah eating for joy and for her parents' joy. It is wonderful to see her parents prepare food, enjoy it together, and feed Savannah, said Yuan, an attending physician at Pediatric GI. It's very important to preserve that joy and quality of life as a doctor. So what he's referencing really is her EOE, because at one point she was off of dairy, nuts, gluten, like all the top 6 allergens, which made things really interesting. And a lot of children can be treated with a G-tube just to kind of replace this, make it easier for them. And I was never against the idea, but if you know my daughter, you know how much she loves food, and I could not take that away from her. So we shared that with him. He agreed that, her quality of life was more important. And he's the doctor that you can text, and he'll text you back by 9 p.m. or 9:30 sometimes. Like if there's something up with Savannah, he's always responsive. And I will say, as a parent, I do not abuse that, because I value it. So be careful what you do, maybe. He also said, this is a journey we embark on together. Every step we took, we made those decisions together. The care from her parents trumped everything, because they know their child best. So these are just things I like to keep in mind. MGH continued a little bit. She was having a lot of difficulty sleeping pretty much her entire life, and still does. It's been exhausting for that, but we found out that she has sleep apnea, which is part of the reason. So now she's followed by pulmonary and endocrinology for hormonal stuff that, pops up, and genetics, we follow up with them due to her rare genetic diagnosis. Physiatry, just again, this is kind of the physiatrist is part of that team where we'll go have everybody take a look at her, and then recommendations will come from that, such as Botox or bracing or things that would be supportive for her. And she's still followed by pediatric surgery and nephrology, just because she's not a very hydrated kid, and because sometimes things pop up to where she needs to be seen by them. But when I think about medical and our journey along the way, I always want to tell parents, it's okay to shop around. It's okay to fire a doctor. It's okay to move on, because at the end of the day, we need to feel comfortable in the decisions and relationships we are making for our children. And thinking about this, there's a couple examples that come to mind that have happened in Savannah's life. And one of the ones that I'm going to talk a little bit about is her genetics appointment, or her genetic journey. Okay, so Savannah was born at MGH, and she was followed immediately for genetic concerns. She had dysmorphic features, which is a term that shouldn't be used in any kind of way you describe somebody's child. And so they gave her a microarray testing. That came back normal. So the geneticist that was, attending in the NICU naturally became our geneticist. And so after we left the NICU, we went and had an appointment with her. And she talked to me, I was 31 at the time, and she talked to me like I was her child and had this very monotone voice. And I'm not going to name names of anybody, but it just was not a good fit for me. And I thought, I'm now a mother, so treat me and respect me as Savannah's best advocate. And so I made a new appointment, looked up a doctor, had great reviews, and we went to see him. And I had been guessing in my head, maybe she has this, based on some of her symptoms. And he said, no, I don't think she has this. I actually think she has this. And he handed me a piece of paper that had a life-limiting diagnosis. And I remember that. I remember sitting in that office. I can visualize it. And I remember bawling in my car. And this is definitely a trigger area for me, because that was such a strong emotional response from that, that doctor handed me this piece of paper that had this genetic syndrome that she doesn't even have. It had a limit of 10 years. She's almost 12. So that's the good story about it. So I was like, I am never going back to him. I'm changing the way I do things. So I went to a different hospital, and I found a geneticist. He was great, except for every time I tried to make an appointment, I couldn't get anyone to call me back. So I got tired of that. So, and then again, I went back to MGH and found this new geneticist and this woman, and she was lovely. She reminded me of my aunt, and I should say aunt. That's a very confusing word for me nowadays, because I live in Massachusetts and everybody says aunt, but I'm from Kansas where we say aunt. So she reminded me, just like her tone and her demeanor and all of that. And so I went, talked to her. She suggested that we follow up with whole exome sequencing. And so we did, and it required a sample of my blood and Mark's blood and Savannah's blood. And about 6 months later, she was almost 4 at the time, we got a diagnosis that Savannah has Ogden syndrome. She's one of, that week, she was one of 2 in the world. By the end of that week, she was one of 6. But that number grew very slowly over the past, 8 years. And now she's one of slightly over 100 in the world. So I know there wasn't a lot of information about it, but I still continued to follow this doctor until I decided I'm going to these appointments to educate her about my daughter when I need to be educated about what to do for my daughter. So I fired her too. Like, this is probably the biggest journey of firing. And do you know where I went? I went back to the doctor that gave me that piece of paper. And the reason I did so is because his reputation is with rare disease. And I thought maybe he would help advocate for some more things. And so I remember walking into that appointment and I was super nervous because I knew I was going to confront the issue. And so I did, and I said, "Hey, doctor, it's been a while since we've seen you. You probably may or may not remember my daughter, Savannah." And I said, "But before we begin, I want you to know why we didn't come back to you in this time." And I told him that he gave me that piece of paper that crushed me internally, and he had no idea. And so I don't know if he'll continue to think about those things, but to me it was a good teaching experience for him, but also like it was hard walking in there, but I want to learn about my daughter's genetic mutation. I don't want to be educating others, like, because we do know more about our kids in a lot of ways, but we also need medical professionals and professionals of other kind really sharing information. So I always say it's okay to shop around. I'm going to give one more example that was more recent, and it's not as dramatic. But I took my daughter to clinic where she was seen by, a bunch of people. And she's got this really cute little body. She's very thin. She can wear anything and look cute in it. And she wasn't in school that day because I kept her home. And I try not to send her to school in skinny jeans because I know it can be hard for everybody that has to help her, change her, all that. But I put her in her skinny jeans, and the first thing the doctor says, "Why would you put her in skinny jeans?" I'm thinking, because I can do what I want. Like, this is my daughter. I can help her choose her style. And what does it matter? Like, if it takes you like an extra second to check out what you need to, I'm always there to support it. But I also thought, like, this doctor in particular is getting a little older, probably closer to retirement, and not the same person that I met 12 years ago, or 11 years ago, I should say, probably more like 10. And I thought, okay, it's time. It's time to, I know of a great doctor I've been wanting to go to, so when they came back in and said, "Can we book your appointment?" And I said, "Yes, but actually I want to see the other doctor." And, things like that, like, this is where I say you're not limited to one doctor, the one that just falls on your path. You can choose who you want for your child. And just one more medical example about kind of that as well is, like, Savannah has epilepsy, and I would not medicate her at all if I had a choice, but unfortunately I don't. And so when we started introducing her to new seizure medications, we got to a point where we're not really making a lot of progress with them. And I said to Savannah's neurologist, "Hey, I would really like to explore the medical cannabis side of things." And what did she do? She supported us in finding the doctor that could support us in doing so. And so he, again, was at a different hospital. So we're at Spalding for things. We're at Boston Children's, we're at MGH, and we were at Tufts until it closed down. So, I think teams are made up of who you want them to be. And I will leave you with this last quote from her pulmonologist. The common goals and collaboration between us and Savannah's family make her care a joy. Find that doctor, like who says her care a joy. She does exceptionally well because of the exceptional care her parents provide. And, you know, yes, we provide her with exceptional care, but we also need this collaboration amongst educators and medical professionals to really be able to provide her this care. Okay, and so this is the support area. There's a lot here. And I think about support, I think about family and friends that support us. We have personal care assistant hours. Most children with special needs in the state do. We have nursing hours that are unfulfilled completely. So she has 3,120 hours of unfulfilled nursing, because that's about 2 years worth of us not being able to find a nurse in this kind of pre or post-pandemic stuff. We only fill about 10 of her PCA hours as well, so it's also, you know, a lot falls on us, and it's not because we don't want to fill them. It's because it's really tricky. The older they get, the harder it is, and people have to be able to move them, feed them, do all this care for our kids. So it's just become more challenging. Government supports that we have: Mass Commission for the Blind, the Department of Public Health, Department of Developmental Services. And so for those who don't know exactly what Mass Commission for the Blind does, any qualifying child ages birth to 14 is registered with MCB, and children's services worker will be assigned. If interested in MCB services, an individual service plan is developed with the family. And examples of this include case management, advocacy, disability placards, which, by the way, we have a disability placard from probably when Savannah was under 2, and it expires in 2025. So that same chubby little baby picture still is in my car. Other things that MCB does: based on income, they can help with respite services, camperships, recreation funding, flexible family support funding. The Department of Developmental Services, DDS is what we would call it, just to eliminate some of the language, but they have enhanced family supports, including intensive flexible family support program, medically fragile family partnerships program, and family support centers, including trainings, parent networking, community connections and resources, services and navigation. And I think of this, for Savannah, we fall under that medically fragile family partnerships, and so she's a part of a program that is run by a company called Communitas, and what they do for us is they give us, she has a lot of amount we can spend on flexible funding for things like respite care or things Savannah needs, or, you know, it's so individualized, so it's kind of created for our family. But like one thing, you know, I also put on there is like cleaning support, which I know might not sound like a lot to some people. Are like, why? Does she not want to clean? It's just sometimes our life's so overwhelming that just to have somebody like come in once in a while and clean our house has really been beneficial for us. The Department of Public Health, so under that falls early intervention, RCP, which is Regional Consult Program. And when Savannah was in EI, I only learned that about RCP as she was about to transition. So what I've seen them do a lot of is provide equipment that the child might need. They also can provide respite. They're a good resource for a lot of different things. The Early Intervention Parent Leadership Program, care coordination services. The Catastrophic Illness Relief Fund is newer to me. I remember working with a child because I probably should have mentioned a long time ago, I worked in the population of 0 to 3 for 6 years. And I remember a client of mine using that as a resource, but for where we are now, we're going to be looking into it as a resource for us to get support with getting a handicap van for our daughter. Mass Start, I remember when Savannah was turning 3 and transitioning into school, we had Mass Start involved creating a health plan for her at the school. And it's not maybe a resource we use as much now, but I know it could be available to us if we wanted to. PD Pals is another program I had found out through my prior job, and they come out and they provide, they have a nurse that comes out sometimes, a social worker. Depends again on the family's needs, and we're so busy and we're not home a lot that we use it mainly for music therapy, but they also have like child life therapy, and it's just another great resource to have in our home. The medical review team, so they look into pediatric nursing home or skilled nursing facilities, which can be short or long term. And a little bit about what the DPH care coordinators provide. Information and referral into the community services, case-specific consultation to parents and educators and medical and social service providers, training in public benefits and local systems of care. For providers, understanding existing entitlements and how to gain access, obtaining service and benefits for families, identifying appropriate community-based resources. I think DPH worked closely also with DDS and like how are we going to be able to support this particular family. Helping parents become better, or helping become better advocates for the families that they serve. And then for parents, DPH helps coordinate medical, social, and educational systems, identifies like the changing needs of their child and family, understands the full range of available public benefits, identifies community resources, gains access to specific programs and services, becomes more effective advocates for their child and family, and they connect with other families who face similar challenges, plan for a healthcare transition. And I think in my area, I live in the Northeast region. We've had a collaboration between our MCB worker and a collaboration with our DPH worker, and they provide a parent group for kids with visual impairments. So they've had this, going for, a couple years, and it's just another great kind of benefit if parents are interested or need it. And personally, like if I think about like how I've kind of, become a better advocate is really by getting involved. And so some of the leadership opportunities that I have kind of put myself in, I sit on the Mass General Family Advisory Committee, where we actually, thanks to our keynote speaker for recommending that to me a while back, that she knew that I loved trying to advocate different avenues, which it's great. It's opening up new opportunities for me and a new voice for me to advocate. The Mass Family Leadership is also, I believe that's run by DDS. I'm going to say, I think it's DDS. But it was like a year-long, I'd say more like 8 months of learning. Not all the time, but we'd go in and learn about how to advocate for our children, make state change. And I did it last year. It was a wonderful opportunity. Ogden Cares Foundation, that is the foundation name for our daughter's syndrome, and I sit on that board as the vice president. I know it sounds fancy, but just because we're such a small group and we really need to reach people and make change, and we've been, it's a newer organization, and we've been really pretty successful in advocating for different things. Like we applied for the Grant Zuckerberg, a Chen Zuckerberg grant, and we actually, it was for $600,000 for the year, or 5 years, 3 years, I can't quite remember. But we didn't get selected, but we were also given a $50,000, like, here you go, we believe in your mission. And that kind of is what started our board off with, we're so little and we're trying to make change, so it can be really tricky. And then in my professional role, I've always been very fascinated with CVI leadership opportunities, and I continue to try to learn more about CVI and put myself in all of that I can. Again, this is all based on my journey from learning with my own daughter. Okay, and this is the PCA part again. I talked briefly about that, but it's been very helpful. We qualified at age 3, and each year she continues to really gain more hours because she's not gaining enough skills to be less dependent. But it's administered from Mass Medicaid. You can hire anybody except for spouses and legal guardians. Adult children, friends, and other relatives can be hired. However, there was this not stipend, I would call it. There was a program in the past year and a half, 2 years, where the PCA hours could be supported through an international health service to where the parents could be paid. It's a little tricky. It's expiring. It was only because of the pandemic. They're looking at ways for parents to actually continue to get paid as care providers, because I can tell you, juggling a medically complex child is not for 2 working professionals. So a lot of times I could say too, Mark's kind of taken the back burner on our end just to support me in doing what I've been passionate about for years. So anyway, the pay rate, so I thought this was interesting, is as of 2022, the rate is approximately $18.15 an hour, which is well below the average hourly rate for home health care in Massachusetts, which is approximately $31 an hour. That's another challenge we face to hiring a PCA, and we have to think about those. Like, our kids are actually need a lot of care, and if you're saying, hey, come in and do this for $18 an hour, they might not want to. So the other interesting piece is, like, with the not stipend, I guess I'm having a hard time with thinking of the word, the thing they have into place to support parents is caregivers right now. They pay them even less. It's $15 an hour, so it's definitely tricky. And then with family and friends, I think anything is possible when you have the right people there to support you. And then I just wanted to list some additional parent resources. So DPH has community support line, early intervention, parent leadership program, Mass Families Organizing Change, Mass Commission for the Deaf of Heart and Hearing, case management, interpreters, tech assistants, advocacy, training and support, and then the New England Consortium on Deafblindness. It's a collaborative system that enables infants, children, and youth who are deafblind to participate in meaningfully in their homes, schools, and communities. And additional parent resources, Mass Department of Mental Health, the Federation of Children with Special Needs, which they have a booth here I saw, Family Ties, Parent-to-Parent Program, Mass Family Leadership, Parent Professional Advocacy League, Family Resources Center at MGH, and Mass Developmental Disabilities Council. And with that, I always also think of don't forget the fun. Savannah, you know, Brenda had talked about earlier in her kind of presentation the importance of engaging our children in their community, and I've never been surfing, I've never been skiing, and I've never played hockey. So there's 3 things that she's done already in her life that I've never done, and I could keep going. I mean, adaptive sports are something that we truly enjoy taking her to and being a part of. I can definitely tell you the surfing was just joyous to watch. I wasn't worried about any of it. The skiing, actually, I went with a colleague of mine, and I was like, do you mean they're really not just going to go down these little hills? They're going to go up on that ski lift? And so, like, I had to let go, like, whoa, like, how am I feeling about my daughter being on a ski lift when, you know, she moves her body a lot? They don't even know her. But I let her do it, and it was the coldest day of the year that year, unfortunately, but she did it. I can't tell you for sure if she had fun with that one. She's not usually a cold weather person. But one of the craziest things I actually feel like I've let her do, and it's a sport we chase every summer, is water skiing. And again, I called the guy and I said, hey, can you tell me what this water ski is going to look like a little bit? I'm just trying to picture it for my daughter. And so he sent me a picture, but he didn't tell me over the phone, like, she's not going to be strapped in. And I was like, so I get there, put her in the seat, and I'm like, is there like a seat belt? And he's like, no, that would be, you know, if she was to tip over, that could cause a lot of harm, basically. And I was like, oh, okay, we can try it. And so she gets in, and you can tell, like, the water was a shock to her at first, but then she's going off skiing, and I don't see her anymore. Like, she's down the lake, like, nowhere to be seen. And then, like, 5 minutes, she comes around, and as she comes in, the joy on her face again is just like, it's the reason I put myself out of the comfort zone and let her try different things like this, but excited to do it again. And that's all.